welcome back to Word Balloon. If you enjoy the videos here, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the Word Balloon YouTube channel, and of course, if you enjoy the audios and the videos, you can subscribe to my Patreon page, patreon.com/wordballoon. JM DeMatties, welcome back to Word Balloon. I'm going to call him Mark for the show because he's nice enough to let me. How are you, man?
I'm good. All things considered, I'm good. You know, considering the state of the world, I feel actually kind of graced and lucky that my family is safe and healthy.
Good to hear.
You know, so all is well in my world, anyway.
That's terrific. I'm glad to hear that. Well, you are providing us with some good distractions in these shut-in months.
Right.
You know, I got to watch both your latest animation efforts, Superman Red Sun, and the Deathstroke long title I don't have in front of me, but
Knights and Dragons. Knights and Dragons on the CW. CW Seed. That's right.
CW Seed.
It confuses people because a lot of people don't even know what CW Seed is. So there's the CW network, and then there's CW Seed, which you can download an app. You can watch it on your Roku, your Fire, you know, probably Apple TV. And they have a whole separate little network. A lot of it is old shows, but they also do new content. They've done a lot of animated stuff. The Constantine City of Demons that I wrote was originally for CW Seed. And the way these things tend to work is really I write a full-length movie. They then break it up into these episodic little bites. For some reason, they put up Deathstroke in a full half hour or 35 minutes on
38 minutes long, man.
Yeah. Usually, we sit and we talk about it, and they break it up for whatever reason. They put it out as all as one chunk. Then they'll release a full-length movie, which will have about 20 minutes more than CW Seed gets. And then I believe if they follow the pattern of Constantine, they'll have the rest of the story minus those 20 minutes for free on Seed after the movie comes out.
Interesting. So
it's you know, they're trying. I think they're going for two completely different audiences: the people that want to watch this stuff on their phones, and then the people that really, you know, they want the DVD, they want the Blu-ray, they want to stream the whole movie with the extra footage, whatever it is. Because you know, you can get it on DVD, Blu-ray, or you know, Amazon has these things, Google Play has these things. So it's coming out in different formats. But right now, the only way you can see the first part is on CWC, and that was a really long answer, but.
No, and I'm glad you made that clear because, and actually I'm going to re-ask. So yeah, the first 38 minutes are on CW Seed for free. They got commercials in there, but that's okay.
Right.
And then, so will the Seed ever have the full movie or just the first act here?
No, they'll have this. They'll have the second half, but what you'll have a full story when they put it together. But the movie version, when it's released, will still have 15 or 20 more minutes of story than the Seed version. So they want to have that little extra oomph to get you to go, you know, either download or buy the DVD. But you'll get a complete story on Seed once they release part 2.
Do you know when part 2 is coming out?
I have no clue, especially now. Yeah. I really have no clue, you know?
No, I understand.
Because I thought I heard something that the movie was going to come out in the summer, then I guess Seed would come out maybe a couple of months after that. But I don't know what anything is right now, honestly, any more than anybody else does.
Well, I know the writers are a lot of times the last ones to know.
Yes, often, if not always, the last one to know.
Yeah. Well, it's a great story, man. We may as well start with the Deathstroke story because I got to confess, I'm certainly aware of him as a Titans villain. I like how Brad Meltzer turned him into also a Green Arrow and Justice League villain because I think he's certainly powerful enough to be that. But this is really great. I mean, I knew a little bit about his background. How much of it is comics and how much did you invent for the movies?
You know, it's a combination of both. It often is with these things. And hold on, I'm adjusting my camera.
It's all good.
So, you know, I knew Deathstroke. I mean, I remember reading the early Teen Titans stuff and when Deathstroke was introduced, but it's not one of those characters that I knew intimately and knew the whole mythology. So what happens is, you know, they'll send me a whole bunch of stuff to read. And I just sort of immersed myself in a variety. They sent me some early Marv stories, some recent stories, some stuff from in between. And what I did was basically go, oh, I like that element. I like this element. I like that. Now let me build a story out from here. And what really attracted me, because I always go from the characters out and the characters first, was the family dynamic. You know, there's a great relationship with the wife, who's also, you know, tough as nails, former military. There's the son and the daughter, and there's all this. It's the ultimate dysfunctional family story in the way, and really it's the ultimate divorce story because it's about this couple that ruptures and how the kids are completely screwed up by it, you know? And so that's what I focused on and then built, you know, Deathstroke to me is sort of like, you know, James Bond in superhero garb in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. I was going to go there too.
That kind of story. And coincidentally, for the first time, right around the time I was writing this, for the first time since about the 6th or 7th grade, I was rereading some James Bond books. Because, you know, when I was a kid, it was like James Bond mania, it was like Beatlemania at the time, and I devoured all that stuff, you know, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, right around then. You know, reading about people drinking alcohol and naked women when you're in the 6th grade was very exciting. You read it now, it's the most tame stuff, you know.
Hilarious.
There's nothing really particularly racy about it at all by our standards now.
Sure.
But anyway, so I was rereading the Bond stuff, so it kind of put that all fresh in my mind. So I think there's a certain Bondian element. And I don't know whether it's in the seed version of the full-length movie. I think it's in the movie. There is an underwater battle that was inspired by Thunderball, you know? So it's sort of James Bond meets this sort of Shakespearean dysfunctional family tale, you know? It was really fun. And that's the fun of these things is sometimes I get handed a character that I'm not super familiar with. And then you fall in love with the character as you write the story. And you find all these wonderful things to play with. So it wasn't an adaptation of any one particular story. It was a few elements pulled from his origin, from some other stories, and then I basically created a whole new story around that. And that's the fun of it. It's
great, man. No, and it absolutely moves and feels like a great spy thriller. And I love, again, I wasn't, other than the basics, I really wasn't aware of Slade as I guess, anti-hero. I'm kind of shrugging. It's adult, as you say, from the family dynamic, very violent, and I'm glad because it seems like the powers that be understand that you can go that far. And as someone who's been doing animation for as long as you have, you've kind of witnessed the evolution. So
when we did Constantine, City of Demons was rated R, and they were like, especially with the seed stuff, you know, this is for grown-ups. Just push it. And as much as I think I'm pushing it, and I'm not a big fan of ultraviolence, really, you know.
Aware.
If you know my work, you know that's not really where I go. But but you know, the animators always take this stuff and just blow it up, and in a great way. I mean, you know, that's the other fun part of this too, because I write the script. It's all this stuff is in there. And I remember even going back to like Justice League Unlimited. I did an episode years ago. It was Superman and Captain Marvel had this big battle. So, you know, I write 3 pages of this big battle, which they turn into this like extraordinary, you know, 8-minute buildings collapse, you know. So the animators come in and they add all this extra level and layer to the story. And then there's the great voice acting. You know, Michael Chiklis as Deathstroke. When they told me that, you know, sometimes I know early on who the voices are. Other times, like I didn't know until they finally officially announced Deathstroke that it was Michael Chiklis. That's just fantastic. You know, a Red Sun when they got Jason Isaacs.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite actors, you know, for Superman. I mean, just fantastic. Just fantastic.
I agree. And both casts are absolutely fantastic. And it's great to see young Slade and old Slade in flashbacks and see the perfect family fall apart. Is pretty cool.
Because, you know, that's the stuff that always really interests me. Everything else, whether it's in comics and animation, that's sort of the stuff that you layer on top. But if you don't have great characters and you don't have great character interaction, and if you don't have emotion and psychology and things that are going to really matter to the audience in a personal way, then it's just like, you know, a bunch of plot jumping around and it's empty at the core.
No, I hear you, man. Again, and it is ironic because for people who know your work, and we've discussed it before here on Word Balloon, your great story from IDW, Savior 28, which is a Captain America, almost Superman of a different kind,
right?
And that's you know, and again, we've talked about your Captain America run and how much I've enjoyed that, and Slade is that great like other side of the coin for a super soldier gone wrong.
That's true. It's true. He's the anti-Captain America in a lot of ways. That's right. That's right. And I never thought about that, but you're absolutely right.
Have you ever talked to Marv? Or, I mean, as you said, you poured over the works, and also on the animation side, because I'm not sure which Asian nationality the gentleman is who directed it. Did you have a chance to talk to past writers about the character, and then also did you have a chance to talk to the director of the animated film?
Sometimes I get a chance to talk to the directors. On this one, I did not. What they do, though, is they'll send me what are called the animatics, which are sort of like the animation equivalent of a rough draft. And so I can, and sometimes those rough drafts don't have the final voices in them. It's just somebody filling in the voices, but you get a sense of the pacing, and I get to give notes and feedback on that as it goes along, which is great. But sometimes I don't see the thing until it's the very end.
Yeah.
And sometimes the director is in on the story conference. It's really different. It's different for each project.
And then going back to the comics, did you have a chance to talk to Marv?
I happened to run into Marv at a convention and just told him I was working on it, and that's about as far as it went. So no, I didn't really. I just sort of took the material, digested it, and kind of expelled my own version of it.
Well, not your first rodeo, man. I mean, you've got. You know how to handle heroes and villains and the like and everything.
I've done a couple of them. Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. Was it an Asian product first, or was it always meant to be global? Because, and again, forgive me, like I know Sam Liu is a great director that you worked with, obviously on Red
Sam.
Sun.
Yeah, and I want to talk about Sam in a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, but forgive me, I don't have it handy. The gentleman that directed. And I'll look it up here.
Right, and I forgot his name too.
Don't worry.
I apologize.
Dragons. Yeah. IMDb is our friend.
Right. No, it was a company called Titmouse Studios, which is an American company.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So I don't think it was an Asian company that did the animation. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure they're an American company.
Sung Jin An is the director.
Right.
So I wasn't sure. Again, I wasn't sure. So you start with a story, send it to them. They send you back animatics, and you refine the script.
Yeah, or it depends on no. By the time that they start working on the animatics, the script is pretty much locked. What happens sometimes is like what happened with Deathstroke, was they timed it out. And it was a little short. Could you write us? I had to write 2 new scenes.
Interesting.
To link a couple of pieces of the story. And sometimes when I work on these things, once I turn in the script, I don't see it again until it's done. And if something like that comes up, someone else on staff, especially if you're working on TV, someone on staff is going to do that scene. What I've enjoyed about these CWC projects is they pretty much kept me in the loop the whole way. So like with Deathstroke, anything they needed, or we needed one line here, whatever it is, they came to me. And it's great to be involved every step of the way, So it was more like that. But you mentioned, Sam. I worked with Sam on, I don't know if you saw it, that we did a death short that was on the Wonder Woman Bloodlines DVD.
Oh, no, I haven't seen
with
that
Neil
yet.
Gaiman's death character. The first time any of Neil's characters have been, I think, in any media other than comics. And, so that was me, Sam, the director, and Jim Krieg, the producer, all of us sitting down, putting together the story and what the right approach was. And that was really great. That was a great one because if you watch it, you'll see it's a very, very personal story. Let me shut off my email so it doesn't ping and pong throughout this whole thing.
We couldn't hear it, but that's fine.
Oh, I can hear it. It's annoying.
Yeah, I respect
so,
that.
it's a really, the death thing I think is one of the best things I've ever done in animation. And, it's a really personal story, but what was great was it was personal for me, it was personal for Sam, and it was personal for Jim because we all really related to it in a very deep way. So, and it turned out really great. So it's great to have the director in on the talks from the beginning. Just getting started on another project that Sam is directing, and we've already had our first talks about the story. So I was glad that he was in from the first stage of it, because with Red Sun, the story was really developed with Bruce Timm and Jim Krieg, and then Sam came in later. So all the work I did on story on Red Sun was with Bruce and Jim, who are phenomenal. You can't find 2 people who understand story better than those 2 guys. So it's just great to work with them. I've worked with both of them on a number of things over the years.
Yeah, and I really do want to hear individual thoughts on both Bruce and Jim. I want you to start with Jim, though, because I think I've heard talk about him the least, and I haven't asked enough questions about Jim. So tell us about Jim Krieg.
Yeah, Jim is just kind of what I said. First of all, he's just a great guy. Jim, if you're watching, I really mean it. and as I said, he's just one of those guys you can start bouncing a story around, because he's a writer first and foremost, but he happens to be a producer at Warner Brothers. But he's a writer. That was the great thing of working with both Bruce and Tim, because they're both writers. You're not talking to a producer who's I don't mean just, but they're not a story person necessarily. They have other skill sets. Whereas those guys are first and foremost writers, and Jim is first and foremost a writer. So you can sit there and you get stuck on something. I may throw something out, and then he'll throw out some brilliant idea just randomly. And it's because I spend most of my time, as I often say, alone in a room with my imaginary friends. Even working on comics, basically once you're working on the script, it's you. You get the artwork, you'll talk to the artist or whatever. But here you're really putting the story together as a team. So I always say I can't take all the credit and I can't take all the blame either, because we work as a team. And like I said, when you're working with guys like Bruce and Jim, it's fantastic because you get on the phone for 2 hours and you just talk story. And there's nothing I enjoy more. There's nothing I enjoy more. I mean, I've been doing it for all these years, so obviously there's nothing I enjoy more. So it's just great, yeah. And they're just both down to earth. There's no bullshit about them, and they're just good guys.
That's cool. And yeah, and Bruce. I mean, yeah. Any other I know Bruce goes back to the animated series, and obviously he's one of the key developers. I just spoke to Paul Dini and Alan Burnett. And got a lot of,
I worked with Alan a lot. Yeah, I worked with Alan.
Yeah, and again, I'm curious about all of that. And you were brought in. You had been doing animation before the animated series, of course.
Well, actually, going back, the first I had done, the only animation I had done before I got into this DC stuff, like in around 2003 or 4, was I did an episode of the Real Ghostbusters back in the 80s. J. Michael Straczynski was the story editor. I always liked that little bit of trivia, and that's when I first met him. But I had worked, all the other TV I'd done in that time period was live action.
And I want to talk about the old live action days too.
And through the live action, when I was working on the live action Superboy show, I became friends with the producer, who was a guy named Stan Berkowitz. I don't know if you've ever interviewed Stan. I haven't yet. I'd love to. He would be a great interview. He's great. He's really smart and really funny. And then when Superboy was over, I had been approached to work on the 90s Spider-Man series. And I mentioned Stan to them, who hadn't worked in animation before. And they approached Stan, and Stan stepped into the Spider-Man show and then ends up going on to having this long Emmy Award-winning career in animation. And then so now Stan, some years go by, and Stan is working on Justice League Unlimited. And he called me up and said, "Do you want to do something for us on Justice League Unlimited?" And what's interesting for me is animation was never on my list. And I talk about this in my writing workshops. You always have to be open for the surprise. You always have your eyes on that goal over there. And sometimes you're heading for that goal and you walk into a wall and you have to go right, and that takes you through another door that you didn't expect. And that's what animation was for me. So, basically, if Stan hadn't called, I might not have had this long career in animation now. So he called, and the first thing they handed me was Alan Moore's For the Man Who Has Everything, which I always say I'm grateful that I don't think I had read it, or else I would have been completely intimidated by the assignment. So they sent me a copy to read, and we worked out the adaptation. I told somebody this story recently, but I turned in my first draft. Now, usually you go through 3, sometimes 4 drafts of these things when you're working on a TV show like that. And I turned in my first draft, and I didn't hear back. And time went by, and I didn't hear back. And I'm thinking, I must have completely screwed this one up. I must have just completely failed. They're never going to want to work with me again. So I sent Stan an email and said, "I haven't heard back." He said, "Oh, you didn't hear back because it was great. There were no notes. Don't worry about it." That never happens. And, I went in expecting the next one to be just like that. It doesn't work that way. Once in a rare while, you get a situation. I had it with one of these movies recently where I did like 2 drafts, and usually you keep going. No more notes. We're done. Network has no notes. And then you get fooled. You think, oh, that's going to happen next time. It doesn't happen next time. It's just a rare occasion. You say, "Thank you, God," you move on, So from that, I ended up doing, I think 7 or 8 episodes of Justice League Unlimited, and went on to a lot of different shows, Ben 10 and Thundercats. I did, I think, 8 episodes of Batman Brave and the Bold. Which one? Yes. Thundercats? Yeah,
I was too old to get into Thundercats when they were first happening.
Right.
And a slightly younger friend is like, "You know how much you love the Justice League writing and stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "It's happening on Thundercats." I'm like, "Okay." And I know Mike Jelenic, wasn't he the showrunner?
Yeah, he was. Yeah. Michael, I work with Michael a lot. Another one. I can't say enough nice things about these guys, and it's not bullshit. It's true.
That's
They're
good.
really nice guys. Really nice guys, and so creative. And what they did with Thundercats, I mean, my son was little, so I knew Thundercats through him when he was watching Thundercats. They took it and they remained true to the essence of it, but they really deepened and expanded that universe. And I was very disappointed when they canceled that show.
Yeah, only 13 episodes.
I know. I think I had 1 or 2 in process that never got on the air because the show was canceled. Yeah.
Jeez. Well, and I know, too, earlier with Mike, you worked on, and also I believe James Tucker, you worked on Legion of Superheroes, right?
Right. I think 3 or 4 episodes of Legion of Superheroes, which was really fun. And then Michael was also the head guy on Teen Titans Go. And
Mike and James on Batman Brave and Bold.
Oh, Brave and the Bold. Yeah, of the show, Justice League Unlimited was amazing. I loved working on it. I think it's one of the best versions of the Justice League ever done in any medium. But I love Batman Brave and the Bold, that show. And one of the things I loved about it was people come up to me and say, some 45-year-old, I'll watch it with my 6-year-old, and we both love it. And it's hard to do that. And I don't take credit for that. That's James and Michael that created the template for that show, And I loved it. I loved everything I did for that show. It was really, really fun, really fun. And I always say they gave me, despite the fact that it was a kid-friendly show, they gave me 2 of the darkest shows they ever did. One of which was the Doom Patrol show, where the Doom Patrol dies in the end. I still think there's 6-year-olds walking, people who were 6 at the time are like traumatized. But what do you mean they all die in the end? And then they gave me one where the Red Tornado creates a son, but his son goes bad, so he essentially has to do a mercy killing and pull the plug on his son at the end.
Yep.
So there are some traumatized, I guess they're adults now, some traumatized adults, and I apologize to all of you. It's like the people that say to me, I read Craven's Last Hunt when I was 6. And I go, what? What kind of parents do you have?
I had a similar experience with Jerry Conway, in a good way, though, because I think I was 9 when the Marvel Tales reprint of The Death of Gwen Stacy came out. And all it did was make me realize that stories can have consequences. Right. I wasn't traumatized. I didn't go postal. And also, by the way, I was going to say regarding Michael and James, they came on Word Balloon when they were doing Brave and Bold. And at first I'm like, I don't know if I want to watch this show. He's like, it's the Earth 2 Batman. And I'm like, sold. And that's in their minds. They were writing, classic.
Right.
Bruce,
absolutely.
And that's the presentation, certainly. It had that Dick Sprang look to it as far as the animation.
Yeah.
And I know
that
great,
James loved the 60s Batman TV show, the live-action show, and it has a flavor of that. And yet, it never got so goofy that it became ridiculously campy. It was always grounded in really good story. Really good story and good character work. And the other fun thing with that show is that we did a few episodes with JLI. So I got to write the JLI. Yep. Which was really fun. We did another episode where I got to work in the famous One Punch from our Justice League, where Batman one punches Guy Gardner. So it was in terms of pure fun, I think that show was just the most pure fun out of any of the actual TV shows that I wrote for.
I bet, man. Which JLI characters did you bring back for the?
What did we have? Booster was in there. They didn't have our Beetle. They had the second Blue Beetle. I think Fire and Ice were in there.
Excellent.
I had one episode. The One Punch episode had Nort in it, which I was thrilled.
Outstanding.
Because I'm always up for some Nort. And it was just a great show. And Michael and James were great. And like I said, I'd love to say something terrible about these guys, but I can't. They're all really good guys and really, really good writers and really smart.
And 2 things about the Death short. How long is it? And can you give a plot without spoiling? I don't want you to mess up the story.
I don't want to give away any of the plot. It's not based directly on any of Neil's stories. Sam, the director, came up with the basic germ of the story, and then we developed it out from there. And I think it's 18 minutes, something like that.
Terrific.
That's like great. That. Yeah, and it's on the Wonder Woman Bloodlines DVD and Blu-ray. Yeah.
I don't know if is it streaming on DC Universe, or you need to get the.
I don't know because I don't have DC Universe. So
I understand. Man, that's wrong. It's so funny. I literally was when I was talking to Paul Dini. There was a DC publicist on. And he's like, Paul, listen. When you're done with the conversation, I got a little present for you. So thankfully.
Right. Hey, DC, I'll take a free subscription too while you're at it.
I think Mark deserves one. given all the great stories he's done.
So yeah, I think you'll enjoy the Death one. That's really,
yeah,
good.
man. No, I'm really psyched to see it. Let's talk. And we mentioned Dietrich Bader and how great he was on, or I didn't. I should have.
And he's Lex Luthor in Superman Red Son, which is completely opposite casting. Yeah,
absolutely.
And he's great in it.
Seriously, Mark, you've had the opportunity to adapt a lot of great stories, and Red Son is really. It was so. I mean, I love the original comic, and the art is beautiful. Dave Johnson did an incredible job. Mark wrote a great story. Mark Miller. I actually talked to him in December about you, and I hadn't seen Red Son yet and stuff. And I said, did you guys have a conversation? He said no, but I absolutely trust whatever Mark's doing. He goes, and again, because you'll forgive us, but yeah, man, we were reading you when we were high school and college age and stuff. So yeah. I mean, I'm thrilled that it turned out as well as it did.
Yeah, it really did. And I knew the story had a reputation. I didn't realize until that movie came out just how big a reputation that story has. It's another one that if I would have really known, I would have been a lot more intimidated. I just knew this is a really cool story. Let's have fun and play with it. But yeah, people love that story, and rightly so. Rightly so. And there's so much in Mark's original. There are so many ideas. And I keep saying, not that that the story is told like a Kirby story, but what I mean is, when you'd read like The New Gods, and every third panel there was another really interesting idea, and then Jack would be like, okay, on to the next great idea, and here's another great idea, and here's another great idea. You could pull them all out and write a novel about one of them, and Red Son has a lot of that in. It's so full of imagination, it's so full of great ideas that the challenge was really winnowing it down, because you're doing a 75 or 80-minute movie, whatever it is. And,
sorry about that. Yeah, my apologies.
That's okay. And you can't include everything. It doesn't work that way. You're doing an adaptation. So I said it's sort of like taking a giant redwood tree and carving it down into a 6-foot sculpture of Superman. And that's kind of what it was like. So a lot of the conversations with Bruce and with Jim were about, what do we keep? What do we let go? What do we change? And then as soon as you change one thing, other things begin to change. Dominoes fall, and you can't change one thing without changing other things. But frankly, I think that's good. There are things in it that you'll see are exactly like the original story, and there are things that are very different. But that's why it's an adaptation. And I think what you hope with an adaptation is not that you're true to the letter of the story, but that you're true to the essence and the spirit of the story. And I think and I hope that Mark is happy with it, that we were true to the essence of that story, although we changed elements along the way, that the essence of his great story is still there in what we did.
Well, and also it gives people who do know the comic a chance to be surprised, and I think in a positive way, and it's something new to watch. No, it really, I mean, it also, for it to be animated and actual action as opposed to Dave's beautiful layouts and drawings and stuff, I mean, it plays on a different, good level, and it's very exciting, and the battles look amazing. Also, all your references too, and again, I understand in the span of your lifetime that you were around for a lot of this stuff that happens in that story.
I'm starting to feel like I'm 100 years old here.
No, not that. Hey, man, you're only like a decade and change ahead of me, man. It's cool.
Okay,
I'm 64. I'm not the age of 64. I was born in 64.
Okay,
so I'm not that far from you, man.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, it's true. It is true. I mean, my earliest memory of a president is Kennedy.
Okay.
My earliest memory of a trauma is the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Wow.
So
Good Lord.
There's a lot of. I was talking to somebody about this recently, that the current situation, this sort of global trauma, takes me back to that. The difference is that was over in a shorter period of time.
13 days.
But for X number of days, I remember walking to school with my friends, if we can divert to this for a second.
Sure, please.
And the conversation was, the world's probably going to end tomorrow. And we really felt that and really believed that. And I don't know, in the 4th grade or something like that.
Good Lord. Yeah, you're not even 10 years old, for God's sake.
Yeah. But I still remember Kennedy got on TV and gave the speech, the subtext of which was, see you around, folks.
Wow.
We're all going to die. That's the way little me interpreted it, because there's nuclear missiles pointed at our country, and if this doesn't work out, we're all going up in smoke. And I remember, at that age running into my room, and I didn't come from a particularly religious family, but I dropped to my knees and I prayed.
I get it.
And
Sure.
that was an astonishing time. And then the next year was Kennedy's assassination, the year after that. So that's like a lot for a kid to take in, just like I can't believe it must be astonishing for kids right now to take all this in and to see their lives physically change the way their lives are changed right now. It's something.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, thankfully, hopefully most kids are with their parents and stuff, and that makes it a little bit easier, and you feel some level of protection.
Although I just got an email from a friend who's home with 6 kids, so
I hear you, man.
It's great for the kids, but I don't know, the parents are probably starting to pull their hair out a little bit.
I've had the same conversations. I understand. What's great about Red Son, both the comic, I mean, it wasn't Elseworlds, but because of the stakes. Imaginary Tales, and sometimes Elseworlds would as well. And I'm sure you wrote your share of Elseworlds back in the day.
I only wrote one Elseworlds.
What was your Elseworlds again?
The Elseworlds was Speeding Bullets, the one where the rocket is found by the Waynes, not the Kents, so that essentially Superman grows up to be Batman. And by the way, I think that would be a great DC animated movie.
I completely agree. And also you collaborated with the great Eduardo Barreto on that.
Yes, who did a beautiful, beautiful job on that. Beautiful job. Yeah.
And that story too, and this is where I was going with Red Son, it felt like one of those classic Silver Age imaginaries. And I know there's a cover of what if Clark Kent were also adopted by the Waynes and that they were brothers.
Yeah, I think that, and I don't think maybe I'd read it as a kid or something, but I became aware of that years after I wrote Speeding Bullets, and someone showed me that cover and I was astonished. But it's such a great concept and there's so much you can do with it. And the wonderful thing, with all these characters, I've talked about it before, is whatever the iteration is, however much you bend them and twist them, the iconic characters, there's a certain, just sort of I'm talking about, you have to get the essence of an adaptation. There's a certain essence to the character that you have to be true to. And so even if you bend and stretch Superman and make him Russian or have him, be traumatized by the murder of his parents, there's a certain essence of Superman, at least from my perspective, that is going to shine through. If you completely twist him so that he never comes back, he's not Superman. He becomes something else, which is another story entirely. But I think for the most part, you always have to stay true to the essence of that character, even if it's a darker essence. But still, it has to be resonant with something that feels authentic about the character.
Well, and that's, I think, the beauty of Red Son, because you understand how he's influenced by his Soviet environment as opposed to growing up in, small town Kansas and stuff.
Right, but his motivation is essentially the same.
Yep.
In his mind, he's an idealist and he wants to make the world a better place. One of the things that we did in the movie that wasn't in the book was to really, really make him have to face the reality of Stalin's regime. And that was a very powerful moment, and that changes him. But it changes him in a way where he's even more determined to make the world a better place and not repeat Stalin's mistakes, even though he, big spoilers, in some ways he does. Yes, but essentially he's Superman, but just with a different set of ideologies fed into his head. The Russians would say that our Superman was brainwashed.
Sure.
So we could look at him as brainwashed, or we could just look at him as he's breathing a different atmosphere, but it's the same urge to idealism and to do good for humanity that's driving him on, and that's why it's so fascinating.
Well, and also, the flip of the coin, you get Luthor, who's always been, as much as he's an egotist, wants to be, and I love this iteration of Luthor, putting it in a modern perspective, where he's Steve Jobs and is trying to make a better world.
Right.
Wants the credit. Certainly wants it.
Right.
Wants Luthor Corps on the logo.
Right, and will also do unsavory things to get there. And that's one of the interesting things about this story too. The way Mark created it is, well, who's the hero and who's the villain? It all depends on your perspective, and that's really true in life, right?
Sure.
It all depends on your perspective, and you look at it one way, and Superman is the hero and Luthor's the villain. You flip that around, you could very easily make an argument that Luthor is the hero and Superman's the villain, or you can make the argument that they're both the villain or that they're both the hero. And that makes for a great story because there's so much there to think about. There's a lot to think about.
Every villain, and I think they really did it well on Smallville when they were dealing with Luthor. I mean, he was really trying in his way with the best intentions to, initially, and life just really kind of wouldn't listen to him and refused what he thought he was doing to help, and then he just got darker because he got rejected, and that was cool. And again, I think you like you said, no, they absolutely are at times the hero and the villain, each of them.
And that's what makes a great villain in any story. The villain that just twirls his mustache and is bad all the time, that's a caricature. That's not a human being. The really interesting villains, first of all, as many people have said, they don't think of themselves as villains. That's why they would never create any kind of secret society of supervillains or any of that stuff, because they don't think of themselves as villains. We all have our own reasons/excuses for what we do when we do something good or bad, So these guys, they all have their reasons, their motivations, and for the most part, don't think of themselves as bad people. They just have certain methods to get their goals that maybe the rest of society doesn't approve of. But that's what makes them interesting. There have to be layers and levels and contradictions and things to play with as a writer. And then when you relate to that, quote, villain as a human being, they're not a villain anymore. I think one of the great things about humanizing any of these characters, but especially being able to look at a villain and empathize with them, is that I think it helps us as a reader, and this may be getting a little deep, but I think it's true, it helps to cultivate compassion. Because if I can look at that so-called horrible person and understand them and have compassion for them, then maybe I can do that in my life too. And look at the people that drive me crazy, or the people on the other side of this issue that I can't stand, and see them with a little bit of compassion. Which these days, we could all use a cultivation of compassion.
Here's hoping, and there are echoes in Red Sun of today's politics as well.
Yes,
you can't help it when you're dealing with nationalism, and in contrast, Soviet nationalism. What was Soviet nationalism at the time,
right?
And that I think plays well.
Yeah. I'm very. Sometimes you don't know. I turn in the script. I hope I've done a good job, and you don't really know how it's going to play until you see the finished thing. And I had one vision of how Red Sun was going to play in my head, and I thought it was pretty good. But when I saw what was done with it, with Sam's directing and the voice acting and the way it was presented, it exceeded my expectations. It's really, I'm very, very happy with it. Really happy with it.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. Certainly Joker made a big splash last year into Oscar season as well. And, of course, made me think of your great Going Sane story, which I think has echoes in Joker. Did you have a chance to see Joker? What'd you think of Joker?
It's a terrible thing to say, is that I haven't seen it yet.
No problem. You're not alone.
DC invited me to the premiere, but the premiere was in LA. So I'm in New York, so I didn't go out for that. But I know it's streaming now, and I actually have a Writers Guild screener of it somewhere, so I will get around to it. I know I got a thank you at the end of the movie when I spoke to somebody at DC, and I said, "So what was the thank you for?" They were, "I'm not sure." I'm assuming it has something to do with Going Sane. If you saw echoes of Going Sane in the movie, then I assume that's what it is. That's one of my favorite stories that I've ever done, and it goes back to what we were just talking about. Finding something that we can be moved by the Joker, that we can feel pity or compassion for the Joker. If we can feel that for the Joker, we can feel that for anybody. And that story means a lot to me, and it's out of print right now. I would love to see DC get that back in print, because it's in terms of the Marvel and DC superhero stuff that I've done, it's right there at the top for me.
I understand, man, and it's one of my favorite stories of the big two that you've done over the years, and of course, also. Great things like Moonshadow. We've discussed those old stories in the past many times. Now, something we haven't done much talking about that you've been doing lately is your workshop, your writer's workshop, Imagination 101.
Right, and I was actually supposed to be having a workshop this coming weekend. Surprise, it's not happening.
I was wondering if during the shut-in, would you consider making it a virtual session?
I've been thinking about that, and actually approached the people from this particular workshop to see, do you want to do it? Because this is Imagination 201. It's a sequel. It's the sequel.
Okay, it's good.
I do the basic 101, and the guys, I think they really bonded at the first workshop, and they really want to do it in person, so they're willing to wait till the fall.
Okay.
But yeah, I started these workshops I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago now. And because I just sort of woke up one day and realized I've been doing this a long time. And I think I was giving a talk somewhere, or my friend Danny Figueroth was interviewing me. And we started talking about craft and all these things. And you suddenly realize we don't talk about these things when we're working. I'm just working. I'm not thinking about my craft. And suddenly you have to find the eloquence to explain these things. And it makes me think about it in ways that I don't think about it when I'm actually working. And I kind of went, well, that's interesting. Maybe what can I do with this? So, when I started in the business, I had people like Paul Levitz and Len Wein and Jim Shooter who taught me. They were teachers to me. I call it my comic book college. And to sit across from Len Wein and have him be your mentor is a phenomenal thing. And so these classes are also a way for me to give that back to people. And so I started. I don't do them a lot, although I enjoyed the last one-on-one that I did in the fall so much. I feel like once we're out of this cloud, I would like to up the frequency and yes, maybe explore doing it online as well. So it was, I started doing them, and it's just really fun. I keep them small, maybe 8 or 10 people in the class. It's a whole weekend. We start on Friday night and go till Sunday afternoon. And the 201, which is more writing intensive, expands out to 4 days. Okay. And it's great. And I end up in the course of the weekend learning as much as I am imparting. Because just through the give and take and the questions and answers, I have to, once again, think about these things in ways I've never thought about them before. So then I walk away learning, and that's great. It's a really great thing. So I do that. And I also have, especially for these shut-in times, I have a story consultation service. If you go to my website, there's a workshop section, and then there's a story consult section where I work with people one-on-one. They send me their work. I read it over. We get on Skype or on the phone, and we talk about it. And it's a great way, as opposed to the classes, it's more intimate because we're working on one piece of material, and I really enjoy that as well. So if anybody is interested while you're locked down and shut in, if you have that piece that you've been dying to get back to and finish off, go to my website, check it out, and I'd be happy to work with you. And again, it's always a learning process for me as well. And to go back what I said before, nothing makes me happier than sitting with someone talking about story. It's just the greatest thing there is.
It also seems to me it's an interesting time, and as a podcaster, that storytelling is finding more and more platforms beyond the traditional.
Yes.
And I wonder, have any class, people in the class beyond prose or comics, have they come to you and asked you about writing scripts for whether it's audio drama or live action or animation?
Well, we talk about animation in the class. That's something we definitely cover. Although I find so far most of the people that come are the most interested in comics right now. But then the people that I work with the consulting, I've worked with people on screenplays, on their short stories, on their book ideas, whatever it may be. So because story is story, and I've seen for myself working, whether it's in comics, in animation, in live action, writing a book, whatever it is, the form is different. The form of expression may be different, but a good story is a good story. And it's all about communicating that story. So you communicate it slightly differently through a screenplay than you would through a comic, than you would through a novel. But the story, getting a good story is the first step. And without that good story, it doesn't matter.
Understood. I'm glad you're doing that. Now, again, we point people to your website, JM DeMatties.com. I mean, is there?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Nothing fancy. Nothing fancy. I'm a plain, simple folk from the country.
Also, I want to point people as they're shut in and they're looking for things to read. Some of your recent stories. You did a great book with Karen Berger for her Dark Horse imprint, Berger Books, and
The Girl in the Bay.
Girl in the Bay.
Karen is one of my oldest and dearest friends on the planet. And we knew each other before either one of us worked in comics. So we go back a long way together. And we hadn't worked together since the Vertigo days, since the 90s probably. So it was just so great to work with her again. And our friendship has continued all these years, but we hadn't collaborated in a long time. And so if you enjoyed the kind of stuff I did with Vertigo, I think The Girl in the Bay is something people would enjoy. I'll just give you the premise, because it's very rarely do I have a story that has such a great hook. Usually it's like I can't explain the story for the life of me. Well, this happens, and then it starts in the 60s. This is the real short version. A young 18-year-old high school senior, hippie chick, acid dropping of the era, is out at a bar one night, meets this guy. It's in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, in an area that I know well from growing up. And they go out onto the docks together. She thinks they're going to be making out on the docks. Long story short, he takes out a knife, he stabs her, throws her in the bay. She somehow manages to get her way back, walks back across the street to the bar, and discovers that 50 years have gone by. It's now, it's now the current day. It's not 1969, whatever year it was. It's not 69. It's today. And then she also discovers that in those 50 years that she somehow lost, someone has been living out her life. So there's a 68-year-old woman out there with her name and her face in aged form. So that's the mystery. And the guy that stabbed her is still around, keeping an eye on things. So it's a murder mystery. It's a search for personal identity. It's a sort of a twisted time travel tale. It's a really, really fun story. And Corinne Howell did the artwork. She's young, she's new, and she's fantastic. Really, really fantastic.
I love how Karen and also Shelley Bond with her Black Cronin pen over at IDW have been hooking up like older creators with young creators and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And I know Karen is really wants to make sure that there are female creators on all these books as well, and it's really it's really important right now. And but Corinne, I had never heard of her. And I saw her work, and I was just blown away. And she did, and her forte is the darker tale, with the horror tinged tale. And she just did a beautiful job with this. I would work with her again anytime. And while we're on the subject of Dark Horse, and since you mentioned Moonshadow before, I will plug Moonshadow, the definitive edition, the hardcover that Dark Horse put out last year. Which there have been a number of editions of Moonshadow over the years. Nothing like this one. Just a beautiful hardcover. Beautiful printing. It's Moonshadow and Farewell Moonshadow, the sequel that we did. And in the back, my original notes, scripts, Muth sketches. I mean, it's just filled with stuff. I was saying to somebody the other day, I'm not one of those guys that saves everything. In fact, there were a lot of things over the years, scripts and things that I would have liked to have saved, and I didn't. But Moonshadow, I saved everything. Wow. So I was able to go through there and find a lot. I found my earliest handwritten notes from years before we ever did the comic. And so it's a beautiful edition, and I'm really, really, Dark Horse just did a beautiful job. And the other thing I'll plug, if we're talking about things that are out there now, is Mike Caballero, my buddy that I did The Life and Times of Savior 28 with.
Absolutely. Go on.
We finally got a project out that we've been talking about for years called Impossible Incorporated.
Absolutely.
Also for IDW. And, we wanted to get back sort of to the innocence and excitement of adventure of a kind of like a 60s Kirby cosmic tale, but done with a modern sensibility. The main character is a 17-year-old girl genius whose father is sort of this Doc Savage, Reed Richards figure who disappeared when she was a young girl. So while she's adventuring around time and space and parallel universes and alternate dimensions, she's also searching for her lost father. And so we get to get our Kirby out. And it was really, really a lot of fun. And Mike, Mike's work. Mike is fantastic, and he just went to town on this and just did some of his best work.
That's awesome, man. And how's he doing? Have you talked to him lately?
Yeah, I spoke to him, I think, last week. I think he's doing okay.
He's doing all right.
He's busy. Good. He's working. And like I said, all of us, if we got a roof over our head and food on the table and we're healthy, we should be thanking God every day.
I totally hear you. Absolutely, man. But back to Moonshadow, and I've said this before. Moonshadow really is in that pantheon of those mid-'80s direct-to-market classics where it's like, wow, look what comic books can do. And I mean that, man. I consider it in the highest regard, just like Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, Mouse. I mean, especially Muth's art. Really, I mean,
well, that was the first combination of story and art. It was the first fully painted American comic ever done. Yeah. It's funny because just today we can combine both things we talked about. I got an email from Karen Berger today saying she spent the last couple of days rereading Moonshadow and how much she loved it and how it's still held up and all this. And we were talking about how old were we when we did it? Well, John J. Muth was, I think, 22. Look at that artwork, and that came out of a 22-year-old. I was a wizened 29 at the time, but he was basically a kid, and he was brilliant from the get-go. And he lives in my area. We get together regularly for lunch, and we're still buddies. And he's just one of the most gifted humans I've ever had the honor to work with, really. He's so talented, so talented. And as you may know, he's made a great name for himself in the children's book world the past 15 years or so, writing and illustrating his own children's books. And,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you guys untangled all the Abadazad rights, or is that still? I'm sorry, buddy. I'm hurting you by saying that.
It is. It's if I was going to pick the great heartbreak of my comic book career, it's that. It's the fact that Abadazad is tied up with Disney, and every once in a while, I have my representatives knocking on Disney's door and seeing what we can do to get it back, and still kind of working on it.
Okay.
Always trying to work on it, because for those that don't know the story, it was a series that I originally sold to CrossGen, and they did the brilliant, magical thing of putting me together with Mike Ploog for one of the greatest collaborations I've ever had with one of the most wonderful people I've ever worked with.
Incredible.
Yeah. And just I don't know if you've ever met Mike or spoken to him. I mean, you could talk to him for 8 hours and he would not bore you, because he would have a new story every 5 minutes about some extraordinary thing from his life, It's the kind of, I mean, larger than life defines Mike.
People who might know him, might know the cult animated film Wizards that Ralph Bakshi did.
Right. And he worked on a lot of different movies, storyboards, and all kinds of things. Yeah. And of course, if you know comics from the 70s, Man-Thing and Ghost Rider and all those classic things, he was Will Eisner's apprentiance.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yes. He got to start working for Eisner on that, I forget the name of the magazine that Eisner used to edit. I don't, was it for the military, I think.
Oh, the PS magazine.
That's right. That's where Mike
amazing.
started. He worked with Eisner on that magazine. That's where he learned his trade. Isn't that amazing?
I'm going to be bothering you for emails, I think, at the end of this conversation.
Right. Mike is officially retired now, so I don't know whether he's doing interviews or anything like that.
Understood.
But, no. To get back to the story,
you're not obligated in any way.
Right. No, it's okay. It's okay. It's a shame. It's a shame that he probably doesn't want to do an interview, because I'm telling you, you could get 6 shows out of Mike.
I have no doubt. Absolutely, man.
So Abadazad was this idea that I'd been nursing for several years, and because I really wanted to do smart, literate kids comics. That's one of my crusades.
Yes.
And I had pitched a whole line of kids comics. I wanted to do sort of the kids equivalent of Vertigo. Do you know what I mean? Vertigo in the sense of high quality writing, high quality art, not talking down, not using, not doing an 8-year-old version of Batman or something, original, exciting, interesting stories on the level of children's literature.
Sure.
And I could never get anybody interested. And then I got it down to a couple of ideas, and I pitched Abadazad around, and no one got it. And then CrossGen bought it like instantly. They put me together with Ploog, but what we didn't know at the time was by the time the ink was dry on the contracts, CrossGen was sinking slowly into the swamp of financial despair,
Yes.
And so the rights got all tied up. I've never had to sue anybody in my life, but we had to sue to try to get the rights back. What happened was Disney came along through Hyperion Books for Children, and they had seen it and fell in love with it, wanted to do a book series with it. I think we only got 3 issues of the comic out. We had done the 4th issue. Never saw print. I have a copy of it somewhere in my office,
Wow.
And so basically, Disney bought CrossGen to get Abadazad, and we were inadvertently great businessmen. We didn't do it on purpose, because they bought CrossGen, but they didn't buy our percentage of Abadazad, so they had to make a separate deal with us. And I have to be fair, they made a really good deal with us. But Disney, being Disney, part of their deal is they own it.
Yeah.
And no matter how long you're in the business, you always learn lessons along the way, But they rolled out the red carpet. They signed us for like 4 books, and we were talking about 10 books or 12 books, and we do the first book, and they love it, and we go right into the second book, and I'm starting the 3rd book, and the books come out, and we're at the Book Expo America, and they're doing, the stairs are decorated in Abadazad, and the big giant signs hanging from the ceiling. And then what happened was our champion at Hyperion left the company. It's kind of like, when they change studio heads and then projects get scuttled. Certainly. Because the new head comes in. Yep. The books, because they were comics and prose, it was a combination of prose and comics. Ploog artwork, Nick Bell was coloring it. We had great lettering. I mean, it was an expensive book. So the sales were actually not bad on the first couple of books, but I think they decided that it was too expensive. Whatever the reason was, so same thing happened. 2 books, we'd finished 3 books. The 3rd book, for whatever reason, only came out in England. I wrote the fourth book, and they pulled the plug.
Wow.
and they own it, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Wow.
You know, I keep hoping if we find the right person at Disney, because, hey, why not a nice Disney Plus series, and then let me finish the books while you're at it. You know, I'll write them in prose if you don't want to spend the money on the artwork. You know, but it's a story. I mean, it's a story that really is near and dear to my heart. So to have it yanked away in the middle, you know, it's about this girl Kate is searching for her lost brother in this world that they thought only existed in books, and so he's still stuck out there somewhere, and she's still looking for him. And I would love to finish that story. So please, Disney, have a heart.
100%, man. No, I remember one of our earliest conversations talking about when it was coming out from Hyperion Books.
Yeah.
And also, I was a big cross-gen reader, so I was well aware of it.
Cross-gen. Yeah, cross-gen was really a great line of books. I mean, a great line of books. And I don't know whether maybe if they had come out at a different time, whether they did too much too soon. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't the quality of the books that did them in, because the books were really good. The books were really good.
I understand. And Mark Alessi, the former owner and stuff, just passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I know. And you know, he was very good to me. He really believed in Abadazad and really supported us. So it's a shame that it all played out the way it did. But there's still a part of me, and maybe I'm naive, and maybe I'm just deluding myself, that thinks that somehow I'll get the chance to finish this story. You know?
As well, and again, not to age both of us, but isn't it great that people that were readers are now in positions, executive positions?
That's true. Well, Abadazad came out in 2000. The books came out in 2006, I think. Yeah, 14
years ago, man.
Yeah, so that could be some grown-ups out there. That's true.
I mean, that's the thing, and the great thing is there's always turnover at these companies, as you were saying, and you know, it's so never say never. Hopefully that something like that does happen. It would make an excellent Disney Plus.
Oh, I think it would be great. Series. And I'd love to see it animated in Plug style. Wouldn't that be great?
100%, man.
That's why I sometimes think Moonshadow, you know, would be great. Imagine an animated film in John J. Muth's painted style, what that would look like. Wow.
It would almost have like that Bill Plimpton aesthetic, though. To me, Plimpton is a different kind of animator and cartoonist, but that, you know what I mean? I could almost see that kind of the way he plays with light and shadow and stuff.
Right.
I could see that working for Muth stuff.
Yeah. Maybe one day. I hope so.
Here, man. Well, when I hit the lottery, we'll.
You'll produce. All right. I'm holding you to it. As soon as you hit that lottery,
when my ship comes in.
That's right.
Absolutely. Right. Hey, well, that's the thing is, yes, and we have now thankfully executives that are younger and they get it. They get what makes this stuff good. And I think, in general, would you say? I mean, I really feel like as an older reader, that what is being adapted, both in animation and live action, I think really does, most of the time, they understand the source material and they do a good job.
Yes, there's understanding and respect for the material. You know, you go back in time and you see some of these things that we saw, you know, as kids or teenagers, and you know, they didn't understand it and they did not have respect for it. And now it's you know, the geeks have inherited the earth. I just learned this weekend, which I didn't know, maybe other people know, that the first appearance of the word geek was in a Dr. Seuss book.
I didn't know that.
I just finished reading this wonderful biography of Dr. Seuss, and that was one of the little nuggets in there. Yeah.
What's the name of the book?
I don't remember which book it was.
All right. I meant the Dr. Seuss.
Oh, it's called Becoming Dr. Seuss. Yeah.
Cool.
Really, really excellent book. If you have any affection for Dr. Seuss at all, it's really thorough. And I've loved Dr. Seuss literally since before I could read, and I love him just as much now or more now. And this book was just filled with wonderful insights and things I'd never known before, and it was really great. I literally just finished it this morning on the couch, you know.
Well, and you can benignly appreciate his works, and then you do find out the backstories of, the Lorax is really a very serious environmental story, and I mean, it hits you over the head with it in the best way. But that's the great thing, that Yertle the Turtle is Hitler. You know, you learn stuff like that, and it's like, what?
right, exactly.
So
here's another amazing thing I learned, that he considered his greatest teacher. He said the person who really taught him more about storytelling than anyone else was Frank Capra, because during World War II, he worked, you know, Capra ran that film unit, you know, doing the Why We Fight films and all these other,
the propaganda,
and Geisel was doing animated films and all kinds of stuff for them. And he said he learned more about story from Capra than anyone else, and that's what helped him more than anything as he went forward with his books.
Have you
Isn't
read
that amazing?
That? Yes, that is incredible.
And Chuck Jones was working on this stuff with him at the same. So Frank Capra, Dr. Seuss, and Chuck Jones.
That's it. Have you read that great book? Five Came Back.
No,
it's about the directors that work in special services, and it's Capra, John Huston, William Wyler. I want to get them right. Who am I? George Stevens, and I forget the fifth right now. I believe Ringo. It's an incredible book. They made a great.
I think it was Pete Best, actually.
I said that because I know you're a big Beatle guy as well, man.
Years ago, I remember AMC was showing these Why We Fight films, and I am as pacifistic a person as you're going to find, as anti-war and I watched these movies. And I was ready to go back in time and enlist. I mean, talk about propaganda that works. Unbelievable,
Well, it was the right.
Yeah,
but again, it helped unite the country.
Yeah, I know.
You can find those on YouTube, but also there's this. I believe for TCM, they made a great docuseries where they really examined the works and everything of those guys. Not only what they made during the war.
Maybe it was TCM that I watched it on years ago. Yeah, could be.
But also their careers after the war. And, Wyler with the Best Years of Our Life and Alive.
Capra did It's a Wonderful Life right after the war.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, Capra's really interesting. And again, a guy as pro-America as he was, also a Mussolini fan, which I think is kind of crazy.
And as he got older, got a little more curmudgeonly and a little more right-wing, the champion of the little guy.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
But, that's what makes people interesting, kind of like what we're talking about with villains. Not that Capra was a villain at all, but it's our contradictions that make us interesting. A lot of times, this is one of my pet peeves, you read biographies of people, and you feel like the author is out to get somebody. So what they're really looking for is any kind of contradiction in their life so they could, call them a hypocrite or make them out to be a terrible person. But we're all filled with contradictions. That's what it is to be human. I remember reading, I don't want to get into the book because I don't want to knock anybody's work, but I was reading a biography of somebody I really admired some years ago. And it felt like every other page is so-and-so, he said this on Monday, but you know what he did on Wednesday? He went and did this. Well, you could say that probably about any living human being because we're all filled with contradictions. And a contradiction and hypocrisy are not the same thing. Hypocrisy are the politicians that are lecturing us about family values while they're screwing their secretary. That's hypocrisy, But contradiction is part of the human condition.
I hear you, man. Do we have a couple minutes left? I don't want to keep you too long. I wanted to ask about a couple of the early live action stuff. You mentioned the Superboy TV show, and I'm glad you were part of that. Gerard Christopher, that was the second.
Yes,
Superboy.
This was the second iteration of the show. I guess it was on for 4 years.
And that sounds right.
And I think in the third season is when my friend Stan Berkowitz came in as producer, and it was more of a kid's show before that. And Stan brought in a much more serious take on the character and the subject matter. And I did 5 episodes in the final season and also did a brief stint on staff. They were filming down in Florida at Universal Studios. So I was down there for 6 weeks helping Stan and another writer, Paul Stubenrau, get scripts together for the new season. It was really fun.
Yeah,
it was a great gig.
I think there's a lot of great stories in there that are fun to watch, and they really got interesting as far as getting into the mythos of Superman. I remember Ron Eli wasn't he playing an older version of
That's right.
Superman?
And we talk about the whole villain thing and having compassion for the villains. I did a 2-part episode called Know Thine Enemy, where Superboy, in order to stop Luthor has recorded all his entire life, his memories on these discs. So Superboy has to actually physically, or not physically, but almost holographically go into Luthor's memories and live his life as Luthor to see what made him. And Sherman Howard, who played Lex Luthor on that show, for my money, is the best Lex Luthor ever. Now, most people don't even know that this show even existed, Yep. But Sherman Howard was brilliant. What a great actor.
I'm not sure if that's on DC Universe streaming. I'm so focused on the new stuff.
I hope it is. I would hope it is. I know you can get it on iTunes and places like that.
Okay.
And, I think Warner Archives has them all on DVD.
Indeed.
Can you get streaming stuff from Warner Archives? I don't know.
They used to have a streaming channel. I think they abandoned it because I was watching Dr. Kildare with Richard Chamberlain.
Wow.
But I wonder what's going to wind up on HBO Max that they're planning,
Right.
including CW Seed, where currently you can see Deathstroke, and also
Right.
the existence of DC Universe. And
Yeah.
I've talked to everybody from Jeff Johns to my buddy Pat Schumacher, who's the showrunner for the Harley Quinn cartoon. And I'm like, are you guys gonna is that gonna morph over there and stuff? Some things are, some things aren't. I know Doom Patrol is gonna be over there, so that's good.
Oh, it is. That's
So
interesting.
yeah, I guess we'll see in a couple of weeks when HBO Max debuts. How many streaming services do you have, good Lord?
What do I have? I have quite a few. I cut the cord, right? So you can save money, and then you end up with 72 apps that you're paying for. I have Netflix, I have Amazon, I have Hulu.
Okay.
I'm actually paying for CBS All Access. They keep suckering me with Star Trek.
I'm the same. Right. Mark, we'll have to talk about Star Trek
Yeah. And but the good, and then I discovered. I don't know if you watched The Good Fight on CBS.
The Good Fight's excellent. I completely agree.
Fantastic show.
Yes,
fantastic.
Absolutely, I agree with you on that.
Yeah. It's easy to get sucked down this rabbit hole, and then there are some things where maybe we share some family passwords, so I get something else. If I give my daughter the password to this, I get that, and my son gives me this one or whatever. So that there's a lot out there. There's really a lot out there.
Well, I'm a putz, and I'm still hanging on to my Xfinity Comcast, and they're letting us watch. They are throwing in Peacock, rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of old movies and old television, there's not much new that's ready yet to get excited about. I'll be interested to see when they reboot Galactica, and I'll certainly try that. I got Apple to get, and I wonder if you want, if you had, do you have Apple or no?
I bought my wife a new computer for Christmas, so we got a year of Apple TV. I have not watched much on it yet.
So you haven't watched the Astronaut Show for All Mankind?
Oh no, is it good?
Yeah, I thought it was really good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll check that out.
And it's Ron Moore and the Galactica people, the reboot Galactica that are behind it. Yeah, I think it's really, really great.
And
that's the only one I've watched.
The new Galactica, I believe, isn't it Sam Esmail from Mr. Robot? The guy that wrote and directed all the Mr.
Oh, yes,
Mr.
the
Robot.
brand new one. Yes, indeed.
The new one, the brand new one.
Yes, it did. Absolutely. Yeah,
so that should be really interesting because he's a really interesting writer and director.
Well, and I agree. And honestly, Mark, no judgment either way. I bought CBS All Access to watch Discovery and Picard. Not a big fan of either. Moving on. I think the DC Universe live action shows have really been interesting, and in some cases, like Titans, dramatically different than the comic. But it should be. Again, we go back to what I was saying about Red Sun. It's like, give me something different as well. But good Lord, Doom Patrol. Who would have thought Doom Patrol would work as a television show? It's amazing.
I don't have the app, so I haven't seen it, but I've heard good things about it. So when DC gives me my free app, then I'll watch them all and I'll say nice things about them.
Do you have Disney
It's like
Plus?
the days of the old radio in the 40s and the 50s. If they would mention a product, a truck would show up at the studio with like all these. You mentioned like this loaf of bread, and you got 100 loaves of bread. So we'll just keep mentioning DC Universe app. Oh, that's right, the DC Universe app.
You're killing me. Well, and I know we're both big old time radio fans.
Yes,
and I know we're big Jack Benny fans, and I'll tell you, I still am. I'm more into the ongoing detective shows than the anthologies. I mean, Suspense was great. It's hard
X-1, Dimension X.
X-1 is good. Dimension X is good, absolutely, from a sci-fi standpoint. I agree with that. And it's weird. I mean, Arch Oboler was a genius, and I think really did horror in a very effective way.
Mm-hmm.
Inner Sanctum, I'm more miss than hit. I don't know.
You know what I got hooked on a few years back? When I was a kid growing up, Westerns were like the thing. If you turned on the TV when I was 7 years old, 50% of the shows on television were Westerns. And
literally,
being a kid in that era, I had my cowboy hat and my Mattel guns with the caps in it, the whole thing. And then as an adult, Westerns actually turned me off. I didn't have any interest in Westerns. And for a period, I had the Sirius XM old radio channel in my car. And Gunsmoke, the radio show, came on. It's amazing. It's great. It's one of the best radio shows I've ever heard. William Conrad as Matt Dillon. who's the guy? The guy that played Floyd the Barber on the Andy Griffith Show is Doc. Yeah. And it's like, and you realize that, oh my God, he's an actor with range. He's a real actor. You know?
Howard McNair.
Howard McNair. That's right. That's right.
And Parley Bear.
That's right. People out there are now going to sleep. What are they talking about?
No. And actually, honestly, man, I in my conversations with various guests and stuff, we've turned on a few people to old time radio. And again, it's great because it really does immerse you in the world. And Gunsmoke, the sound effects are so authentic. You really do feel like you're listening to an audio documentary of the old West.
And it requires you to complete the story. It's not, you can't sit back and just get the complete story. Your imagination has to complete the story. I raised both my kids on old radio. So, they were, contemporary kids, and they were 8, 9 years old, sitting in both of them at various points, sitting in their rooms, popping in one Jack Benny tape after another, and that's what opened the door for my son, to move on to the BBC radio drama. So he got into Lord of the Rings and Hitchhiker's Guide and all that. So my daughter growing up, I think she did a paper in grade school on Jack Benny. She did a paper in high school, and then she did a college paper on Jack Benny.
Wow.
So I remember when they were younger, when she would do this paper, and it's like, the other kids in the class had no clue what this was. But so I had these 2 kids living in the 1940s. My daughter always used to say, I was born in the wrong decade. We'd show her these old movies. I want to raise my kids on this classic old stuff. And she said, she wanted to live in a 1940s movie, basically.
I think I would have, and especially living in Chicago where there was such a hub of radio drama going on and comedy, I think I absolutely would have been working on one of the soaps or something like that, either as a writer or a performer, because I absolutely love it. And also, like you were saying, the great thing is certainly the international audience is well aware. All the other countries still make a ton of great audio drama. BBC Radio
still does it.
Amazing shows, incredible shows, absolutely.
Yeah. And what's nice, really, the podcast world has brought back radio.
Yes,
it's snuck in under a different name, and now my kids are constantly listening to podcasts, and now it's not just the informational podcast, but it's basically radio drama.
100%, man. My buddy Susan Eisenberg, animated Amazon Wonder Woman. Susan. She was working on a revival of Suspense, an anthology where they were taking the old scripts and modernizing them.
Yeah, that's great.
And there's really absolutely, man. Well, and that's why I was wondering about your writing seminars and stuff. If anyone was coming at you with that, do you, as an old time radio or an old Hollywood fan, do you listen to Katrina Longworth, and You Must Remember This?
Yes, absolutely. I am such a sucker for that stuff.
Oh, me too, man.
Such a sucker.
That format intrigues me, and I have a feeling I might be using your services at one point. A boxing story about when the mob really was controlling boxing, from when Joe Louis retired to Sonny Liston. And I think that period is incredibly interesting, and it's covered briefly in Raging Bull regarding LaMotta, but there's a lot of very interesting stories about fixed fights and, what was going on those 13 or so years.
And you know what I'm thinking as we're talking? Someone like you, a Karina Longworth kind of podcast, but with the history of comics instead of the history of Hollywood.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah,
that would be really interesting. That would be right up your alley. Go for it. I want you to do that now.
There you go. All right, I'm snipping this part out so people don't hear us spoiling the idea.
Right, that's right. That's
awesome.
It's a cool idea.
Back in 1959, they did. That's when the Twilight Zone started, so it had its 50th anniversary last year. And you rewrote an episode, or part of an episode, one of the stories for one of the.
I wrote an episode of the 80s revival of the Twilight Zone. Yeah, I did an episode. That was the first television script I ever sold, which was amazing to me then. But now I look back, it's even more amazing because I am such a Twilight Zone fan. If I was making a list of all my favorite shows of all time, that would be number one. So to start out in that arena with the Twilight Zone episode was really an amazing thing, and that was really through the oh gosh, my mind is just blanking out, so I'm not going to get into where it's going because I can't think of the person's name.
Well, Phil produced it, and I know Marty Pasco was working with it.
Right, Marty Pasco actually was the one who did the rewrite on my script. Yeah,
that's excellent. Yeah, I heard he was a story editor there. Marty's in California right now, and
Alan Brenner. Forgive me, Alan. I just went completely blank. Alan Brenner, an amazing writer, fantastic writer, who's also written some comics too. But he's a novelist, Emmy-winning TV writer, And I connected with him, and I started pitching him, and he was the one that opened the door for me. I sometimes get Alan Brenner and Alan Burnett. I get their names twisted in my brain because it's so close, you know.
Yeah.
But Alan is just a wonderful guy and one of the best writers. He did of the '80s Twilight Zone. I think the absolute best episode was called Her Pilgrim Soul, which is one of the best things I've ever seen on television. It's about a soul that manifests in this hologram. And beautiful, beautiful story. And Alan is one of those guys that really, really writes from the heart. And he really opened that door for me. And so I owe him big time.
I've talked to Straczynski about writing the Twilight Zone, and because he wrote a couple episodes, and well, he was the story editor, I think.
Right. After the CBS version, they wanted to continue it, and they went to a syndicated version, and Straczynski was story editor on the syndicated version. Yeah, not the Marty Allen version, but the one that came right after that.
Yeah.
But then they syndicated all of them together. Yeah.
Understood. No, I think, again, you know, the original, as you well know, I mean, the greatest minds in science fiction wrote for that show. Richard Matheson, Charles Beaumont, of course, Serling himself.
Yeah.
Earl Hamner, the Waltons creator, wrote some good Twilight Zones.
Yeah, yeah. And the bulk of them really were Beaumont, Serling, and Richard Matheson. If you just take theirs, that's probably 3/4 of all the shows. And Serling wrote an incredible amount of those shows himself. It's just extraordinary.
I hope I'm saying his name right. George Clayton Thomas, I believe.
George Clayton Johnson, right?
Yes, indeed.
He did the one with Robert Redford and the old lady in death and A Game of Pool.
I was going to say Game of Pool, exactly.
Great episode.
Jonathan Winters, yes.
And to tie this all together, have you ever heard the Twilight Zone radio dramas?
I have. What do you think of those?
I like, you know, they're not all perfect, but the ones that work are really, really good. You know, I had heard some of them, and then you must be familiar with archive.org.
Yes,
you know
of course. Absolutely. Great repository.
Archive.org. I guess it's getting late in the day.
No worries, man.
My tongue is abandoning me. I woke up like at 5 today and couldn't get back to sleep. So I'm getting
Oh, geez, I hate that. Yes.
So I didn't know they'd done like a couple of hundred of them. So, and they're all free legal downloads at archive.org. So I recently downloaded all of them. So a lot of what I've been listening to lately has been the Twilight Zone radio dramas. So it's really fun. Really
some
fun.
Some of the adaptations they did of especially the half-hour ones, they really pad.
There's some padding in there, but some of them are really well done too. Some of them are really well done.
Well, and I know fans of the show, the original show, and wanting the opportunity to work in radio, like Jason Alexander. I know Adam West did a couple, and
they would get some really good actors for the leads.
Yeah,
and then they would have, I guess, local Chicago actors come in and play the other parts. Jason Alexander did a bunch of them, I think. Yeah,
I think you're right. Yeah. Absolutely, and of course Stacey Cage narrating, which I thought was an excellent choice.
Was actually did a great job as the narrator. Yeah, so absolutely. No, but some of them, just like anything else, when you have 200 of something, some of them aren't so good, and some of them are really, really great. But it's the Twilight Zone, so I really enjoy them all. And it's it's just fun. I love to listen to old radio when I'm driving around in the car. So to listen to a Twilight Zone in the car is a fun thing.
I'm with you.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right, we're both running low on our fuel right now, so I'll let you go. But honestly, Mark, terrific conversation. Thank you for doing it.
It's always great to talk to you, John. Always great to talk to you.
Well, and seriously, man, it blows my mind that we're friends, and because as someone who was reading you as I was in high school and at college. Moonshadow was in college. Like I keep telling you, not too far behind you.
Right. And, well, but what people don't know is that I was 7.5 when I wrote Moonshadow. I was a brilliant child.
A young Mozart, absolutely.
Right. I could write it, but they wouldn't allow me to buy it though because it was an adults-only book. So it was a very difficult situation for me. I'm definitely babbling now.
Not at all. Go to jmdmatties.com and check out his writer consultancy service, but also Imagination 101. And
we'll start up some more workshops in the fall, providing the cloud has passed. I hope it will be okay by the fall, but I look forward to doing more of those. Yeah.
Well, stay safe and stay healthy.
You too, John.
And people go search for some of your favorite comic arcs that are collected and graphic novels, Brooklyn Dreams among them, and all the other wonderful stories from Mark DeMatties. It's always a pleasure, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Take care.
Thanks again for watching another Word Balloon video. We've got plenty more at our channel, Word Balloon. If you enjoyed it, please like it and consider subscribing to the channel. And of course, support me on Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. Thanks a lot for watching.